Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to Brew Crew Review Podcast. I believe we're at 175 or 76, something like that. So joining me today during this holiday season is Vince Travato. Vince, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Craig. How are you doing? You sound a little stuffed up. Not too bad. Hopefully you're feeling okay and getting over whatever it is that you might have picked up in the Wisconsin winter. I know it's snowy up there right now.
Yeah, I'll get through this. It's just a little bit of head cold, so yeah. Hopefully I'll be all better before the holidays. So yeah, the big news, though, and that's why we wanted to jump on and do this podcast for our listeners, is I know that we talked last time on the podcast that we really feel that the Brewers' offense last year was so terrible that there really needed to be some roster turnover. And with the shocking news of David Stern stepping down as president of baseball operations and now just GM Matt Arnold really fully at the reins of this ship, that we thought maybe there'd be quite a bit of roster turnover. And so far, I think this is proving to be true. But it started with a big trade here that I think no one really saw coming, and I think so far has been universally loved by Brewer fans. By not only Brewer fans, but pretty much everyone throughout baseball is saying that the Brewers were the winner of this trade. So let's quick get into the details in case you haven't been paying attention, Brewer fans. But so the three-way trade the Brewers were part of. The Atlanta Braves landed the biggest piece in the prize of the trade, and that would be Sean Murphy, catcher, all-star catcher that was on the Oakland A's, traded to Atlanta. He still has 3 years of team control, so he was really the biggest piece. So the name in this trade, of course, and then Oakland received from Atlanta. They received Kyle Muller, Freddie Tarnuk, so a left-handed pitcher, a right-handed pitcher. Robar Salinas, right-handed pitching reliever, and also catcher Manny Pena. And also in part of the deal from the Brewers, the A's receive Esteury Ruiz, outfielder / utility infielder, that the Brewers just acquired in the Josh Hader deal, as I'm sure is fresh in everyone's mind. But the Brewers end of it, they received from the Atlanta Braves 25-year-old all-star right-handed catcher William Contreras, younger brother of Wilson Contreras, who just signed a big contract with the St. Louis Cardinals, our rivals. And also as throw-ins, we also got a couple of young bullpen arms, and that's Joel Payamps and also right-handed pitcher Justin Jaeger from the Oakland A's. So from the Braves we got Payamps, and from the A's we got Jaeger. So it's pretty intriguing trade, and I guess what are your thoughts on it, Vince?
Well, I think I will join with most of my fellow Brewers fans here and say that I really like this deal, and it's kind of refreshing to say that. I know that we were all, I don't want to keep going back to this forever, but I know how disappointed all of us were for the most part with the Josh Hader trade. And it's nice to be enthusiastic about a move that this front office has made. I think that the Wong trade is a net positive for the Brewers. I wasn't a huge fan of the Renfroe trade just because it depletes our lineup a bit, I think, on the power side. But this is a move that I think the Brewer fans can really get behind. I was really excited to see that the return was a guy who we still have team control over for the next 5 seasons. That's very exciting when you get an all-star talent for that many years that's already under contractual control. I think that we probably won this trade in terms of what we gave up. I think that Ruiz has some positive value for sure. I don't think that he's a guy that we're not going to miss on some level, but I certainly think that we more than made up with it with getting Contreras. And, one of the best things about this trade to me was that Contreras is playing a position like catcher, and to have that solidified for this long, provided that all continues to go well with his career. I think it's a really positive thing for the Brewers. And I think it's going to pay some immediate dividends on the field. A lot of times a team, especially a team like the Brewers, makes a trade, looking at the longer term future or even a shorter term future situation. And I think that this trade manages to kind of knock off both the present and the future in the same deal. So that's why I'm especially excited about it. I think that we're going to be improved on the field in 2023, and I think that this makes the team better in the long haul as well. So overall, I'm going to give Matt Arnold an A+ on this deal. The fact that we got 2 other bullpen arms, which have some potential upside, to me is just icing on the cake and a bonus, considering that all we gave up was Ruiz. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop and figuring out who else we might be giving up on when we first started to hear about the trade from a few of our other colleagues who were reporting it. But for me, this was definitely a win for the Brewers.
Yeah, and a lot of people are questioning throughout baseball, is Sean Murphy with 3 years of team control even that much more valuable straight up than William Contreras with 5 years of team control? I mean,
right.
I think that's like a horse apiece. I mean, they were both all-stars last year. Obviously, Sean Murphy is better behind the plate, but probably slightly less. Maybe equal with the bat, but less power than Contreras. And again, obviously Murphy's more proven also, but Contreras had awesome rookie years last year with 20 homer and less than 400 at bats with a really good OPS. And power hitting catchers that young and team control ball do not get put out there on the block very often. And obviously the only reason he's made available is because they're acquiring a catcher in this trade. So it's very interesting, the whole dynamics of this, because the only reason that the A's are even willing to trade Sean Murphy is because when they traded Matt Olson to the Braves last year, they required top prospect catcher Shea Langeliers in that trade, and therefore made Murphy available. And now, of course, he's going over to the Braves. So it's interesting. And all this movement, us not getting Olson, like I know you and I wanted last year via trade, somehow has netted us Wilson Contreras here and a catcher.
Yeah.
Huge hole in our roster, obviously, with Omar Narvaez becoming a free agent and really underperforming, I guess, last year, especially. But
yeah,
I mean,
and Craig, I just want to point out too, to your point about the defensive side of this trade. I agree that I think that obviously Murphy is a lot better defensively than Contreras, which is probably the reason why the Braves wanted to make this move in some ways. But that being said, I think that the Brewers particularly have the ability, as was pointed out in the press conference following the trade, to transform catchers and take their defensive game to new levels. And I think that that's a credit to Charlie Green. We've heard from numerous sources that he is a guy who has been able to work with a lot of guys who were not viewed favorably defensively over the years, including bigger names, guys like Yasmani Grandal or Omar Narvaez or Manny Pena, guys who were rated fairly well offensively and had average to below average catching metrics, who, after working with Charlie Green, are able to improve dramatically on that side of their game. And I even think that it goes back further to guys like Jonathan Lucroy, who came up through our system when Charlie was a roving catching instructor. And now I know he fills a variety of roles with the Brewers organization, but I think that, having somebody like Charlie Green in the organization, Nelson Corridor, being in the organization, these are guys who have a track record of being able to work with catchers who are rated a little bit lower defensively and who are able to make vast strides defensively during their time in a Brewers uniform.
That's a great point, and kudos to the Brewers having Charlie O'Brien for just that. And yeah, all your points are valid. I mean, even back when we acquired Narvaez from the Mariners a couple of years back, he had a similar profile where he was really better with the bat, but not so good behind the plate. And I think he almost switched his profile over his couple of years with the Brewers. And I think Charlie O'Brien definitely, like you mentioned, probably had something to do with that. And there was actually some talk that the Braves were considering moving him off catcher. Even the fact that he has a weaker throwing arm, had a lot of pass balls as a rookie, and wasn't all that great in framing. But I think a couple of factors here: the fact that he has so much more valuable by being that catcher. I think that's and the fact that his older brother is a everyday starting all-star caliber catcher, formerly of the Cubs and now with the Cardinals, both are rivals. I think my guess is that William Contreras himself wants to stay at catcher. So I think that being young enough, 25 years old, and willing to put in the work to make himself better behind the plate, I think he's really going to move on to a great situation here with the Brewers. And I think that he's going to be an asset to us for the years to come. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to remember a last time there was a Brewer trade that was this universally. Even Christian Yelich, I think there were some fans when that trade went down that were like really, thinking we gave up too much prospect, and too many young players in that deal. But obviously that proved to be not the case. And I think this trade is even more universally thought of as a complete win for the Brewers. The one question I guess
I would tend to agree, Craig. And to your point, I think that Contreras has the most value as a catcher. So I very much think that he is going to stay at that position. And we've also heard from our anonymous source, Tom Carter, who said the same thing after talking with William. I think that the idea is that they're going to keep him as a catcher. So thanks to our anonymous source, Tom Carter, on that bit of information as well. One of the only guys to talk to William Contreras so far since the trade.
Yeah, and once again, he prefers to be called TC, just so he keeps giving us that inside information. But yeah. No, and actually, and I think that this trade does it. A question to you and also to Brewer fans that are listening. It almost feels like this softens the blow of the shockingness of the Hader trade, because I think that Ruiz, who could become a really good player in his own right, I think a young catcher has already established himself slightly at the major league level, is much more valuable, especially with 5 years of team control, than someone like Ruiz, who I think has got obviously a high ceiling, but also a really low floor. And I think his variables are off the chart as far as he could just literally turn into nothing, in my opinion. So does it soften the blow of the Hader trade, knowing, like, looking back, if assuming Robert Gasser becomes a starting rotation member at some point with some upside, really now what we've got to show from the Hader trade of just, from this past July, which is not that long ago, we've got William Contreras and Robert Gasser. Does this change your opinion of the Brewers making that move at the time, or does it still feel like the wrong move to make?
My answer is no, it doesn't. I still think it was a bad trade. I think it made a bad trade less bad, I guess, is my best take on it. And the reason I say that is because it took us out of the running in a year that we were very much in the running. So that's really what bothered me about the trade, is just, when you're at first place from opening day until the trade deadline, and then you make a trade that makes your team worse, that to me is not going to ever be a good trade. So I think even more, especially for a team like the Brewers that, have such a small handful of postseason appearances in the entirety of the history of the franchise. So no, I think it was still a bad trade, but I do think that it made a bad trade better, I guess is my takeaway. And that doesn't take anything away from Contreras or Gessner. I think that really it was more the timing than anything. If they would do the Hader trade, if they would have done the Hader trade the day after the World Series this year in 2022, and we got those two guys, I would have actually been okay with that. I think I think I would have been far less upset about the trade, at least, and I would certainly have gone into it with a bit more of an open mind in terms of judging the trade. I think that for me it was the timing more than anything, and I don't want to continue to rehash this trade every single podcast, but it is important enough that we should for a while still, because it is a trade that has had such an impact on the franchise. And as Craig Counsell said at the winter meetings a week or two ago in San Diego, he and the Brewers front office kind of didn't understand the full impact that it would have on the clubhouse and on other facets of the organization. So yeah, I think it was a bad trade that was made a little bit better in the last few days here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the same assessment of it. Basically, I don't think it really softens a little much on it. I mean, obviously, getting Contreras is a big get, and like a much more on the Ruiz. But with that being said, if the Padres came to us right now and said, well, will you take? We'll trade you back Hader for Contreras and Gasser, I'd probably do it. Even if we just had him for this season. I mean, I really think he's that valuable to a team with playoff aspirations that it'd be worth doing to me. I would sign some other free agent catcher instead or whatever. I mean, that's what I would do. But with that being said, yeah, like you said, the timing made it pretty horrific, and it really hasn't changed much. So unfortunately, just real quick.
Yeah, and I will say too, I think that this trade can't be all that we do this offseason. I think that this is it's a good start. I don't think that we're there yet though. So I think we've upgraded now from Narvaez. So I think that's a net positive for sure. But again, we've kind of regressed in some other areas perhaps. So I do think that my hope is that the Brewers don't see the fan reaction and say, oh, good, we've sort of placated a lot of people who were pissed off at us still from the Hader trade. So now we're good. I want the message from the fans to be, hey, we like this trade. We need to keep going in this direction. I think that's my mindset with all of this.
And we're sitting here on December 15th, and I think we're one of only two teams outside the Miami Marlins. They're the only two teams that have not spent a dime in free agency yet. So, again, the offseason still got plenty of time, but it feels like we're in the same position we are every year, at least the last couple of years, where we're laying in the weeds to jump in the bargain bin.
To be reactive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or wait until, everything shakes out and we're like, oh, it's like musical chairs. Everyone grabs someone and then, well, no one really needs these outfielders anymore. So, hey, Will Myers, will you sign with us for $6 million in 1 year? Oh, cool. Come on board. Something like that. It just feels like we're going to be like that. So we'll see how it plays out. But we're not targeting anyone that we're going to be signed to a multi-year contract at this point. Real quick before we move on from this trade, so Joel Payamps, right-handed pitcher. Again, he does not have a very good strikeout rate. He's got some nice pitches, but I mean, he really just profiles a bullpen arm only. The value to us is that depth in the bullpen, and he's got minor league options and lots of years of team control left where we can shuttle him back and forth. And that's something that this organization seems to really like to do to keep fresh arms and also just for depth reasons. So he does hold some value to us for that. And the same thing, Justin Yeager, he has a huge strikeout rate, kind of opposite of Payamps, a huge strikeout rate in the minor league so far. Coming over from Oakland, I really think that he could have a future, back into the bullpen profile. However, he does walk a ton of guys. So again, it's almost like any reliever prospect ever that has been marked a future close or anything like that. He's got that just such volatility. You just don't know until he gets more experience. But he's an intriguing arm nonetheless to add to our system. So, I mean, I think we would have won this trade if it was just Ruiz for Contreras straight up big time, but adding those guys is just like icing on the cake. So big kudos to Matt Arnold. I think he fleeced this situation by getting involved as one of the three teams in this trade for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, the arms are great. You never know. Arms are in some ways a dime a dozen in the bullpen, but they're also guys that tend to very much increase or decrease their value year by year. So I don't know that we know exactly how high their ceiling might be, because we might find that these guys end up developing an incredible capacity to, be an eighth inning guy, for instance, or who knows? We just don't know. Sometimes these guys take longer to develop generally, and sometimes you don't really see the potential of what bullpen arms particularly can do in the minor league. So if you've got, a few positives like a plus fastball, if you're able to, to generally control 3 pitches, those types of things are things that the Brewers front office is going to see and be able to at least work with. So, and again, if neither of the pitchers that we got in this trade pan out, I still am going to consider this a win to get, an all-star catcher for Ruiz for 5 seasons. So I'm going to take that. But anything that we can get from these guys is going to be a bonus. And, who knows? Maybe they're throwing in a trade with somebody else down the road too. We just don't know how that can play out. But if it's nothing, it's still a W for this team.
And it should be pointed out that Contreras' rookie season and his numbers they put up with the Braves were quite a bit. I think it was very unexpected. He was never like a top 5, even in their system prospect in the Braves system going into last year. So I think his numbers at major league level last year far outweighed a lot of his years in the minor leagues for the Braves, but it could have just been a sign of a breakout. But on the flip side of that, same thing with Esteury Ruiz, who really was not even a big prospect. He had some mediocre years But then all of a sudden broke out last year big time at AAA and had like hit 330 with like a 450 on base percentage and had like 80 some steals throughout 3 levels last year, or 2 levels and 3 teams, whatever. But the bottom line was that also could be somewhat flukish as well. So I mean, until he established himself a little bit more, I'm completely fine moving on from Ruiz, and I don't think anyone, again, he didn't do that well for just the Brewers, and so I think it's a lot easier for a Brewer fan to swallow moving a player that really didn't even get the opportunity with us. So I think people are really excited. Catchers who can hit, especially for power, are difficult to find, young ones especially, and having Contreras 5 years team control is really exciting because now we don't have to worry about that position for a number of years, and that's teams always have a hard time finding good catchers, and so to get a in my opinion, a top 10 in baseball catcher with 5 years team control is pretty awesome. So huge kudos to
especially Craig, when we've got the ability to teach more on the defensive side than the offensive. It's I think tougher to develop offense in a catcher. I think the defense is a more naturally coachable thing in some ways, with a catcher who's got to focus on defense a little more anyways. So I think that it's really good when you find somebody with the skill sets of William Contreras and what he can potentially add to this lineup. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what he's able to do at Miller Park, and I'm excited to see hopeful improvements in that position from last year's Narvaez Caratini platoon. I like the Contreras Caratini platoon much better.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, with Contreras on board, who I also really like, especially as a backup catcher, or even a platoon guy. But I think that when he gets day off behind the plate, Contreras will even slide in for some at bats in the DH slot, especially against lefties. So we shall see. So I think he's going to be a really valuable piece for this team on the offense side, and plugging. I mean, there's some projections. I think Ross Resource plugged him right into our cleanup hitter, which is kind of saying something, but about the middle of our lineup. But I mean, the bottom line is this kid can hit. He's not going to be the number 8 hitter in a lineup. I mean, it's pretty exciting in my opinion. So. All right, moving on.
Totally agree.
Moving on to the next trade, the Brewers also made, obviously a minor one, but they just yesterday acquired second base / first baseman Owen Miller from the Cleveland Guardians for cash or a player to be named later. So Owen Miller is 26 years old. He was drafted in 2008. In the 3rd round of the draft by the Padres out of Illinois State, but he's originally from Mequon, Wisconsin. So he's kind of a hometown kid coming home. And he started off, I mean, he was actually traded a couple of times from the Padres to the Guardians just over a year ago for the Mike Clevenger deal. Obviously, it wasn't the main piece in that trade, but now coming over to the Brewers, I think he was last year for the Guardians. He started off the hitting scorching hot in April. In fact, I think he was league baseball in batting average, like hitting like 450 in April last year. But then it really crashed back down to earth. His bat did, but he has a pretty good track record of hitting in the minor leagues. And I think that the Brewers really sought him. And I think he was a victim of a 40-man roster crunch for the Guardians. That's why he was made available to us for it's going to be virtually nothing.
Yeah.
So it's exciting because he's really just entering his baseball prime, being 26. And I think with a little bit more opportunity, he could establish himself as an everyday player. So he reminds me a little bit of like when the Brewers acquired Rowdy Tellez, where like he wasn't really getting the opportunity, wasn't really, earning himself one. But given everyday at bats, he could really turn into something. Now, I don't think he quite has the power ceiling as Tellez does, but I think given the opportunity, he could become a everyday regular. And for a hometown kid, that's pretty cool. And he really is a fan favorite wherever he went. He's been known as a gamer, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I know that I don't know if you read the report from Scotty's interns, but our colleagues Scott and Chad went to the press conference today, and Owen was asked probably by Scott about who his favorite players were growing up or what it meant to be a Brewer, and he said that he's always dreamed of being a Brewer and that his favorite players growing up were Ryan Braun and Nigel Morgan. It's hard to believe that we've already got guys playing the big league who kind of view those guys who viewed Niger as one of his idols. But that is a quote that came out of the press conference today from our colleagues Chad and Scott via the interns.
Well, it's really starting to make me feel old. So you think the guys on the team, Ryan Braun entered the team, I guess, 15 years ago. So I guess Owen Miller was about 11 years old, which is pretty much baseball childhood prime when Ryan Braun came to the league. So I can see him being his best player. But wow, it's kind of
Owen Miller was, let's see, 2007 was Braun's first year. Owen Miller was 11 when Bronny made his debut.
Yeah, so wow, and now he's a Brewer, so that's pretty cool. But I guess we should also point out that in order to create the space on the roster for Miller on the 40-man, the Brewers actually had to DFA a former top catching prospect in his own right, and that's Mario Feliciano. I think I might.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was a top 10 prospect here in the Brewers system for a number of years. I think there were some thoughts, obviously, that he could become an area catcher, but it's an unfortunate story because. Oh, go ahead.
He's still in the system though. He wasn't claimed by anybody apparently, so he I think is still in the Brewers system. That he. My understanding is that he's already passed through waivers, but I guess that's not official until 48 hours after the Miller acquisition, but we don't know exactly what time that happened. But my understanding is he's outrighted off the roster without being claimed. He just remains in the Brewers organization in the minor leagues. So
yeah, so I think we're taping this podcast still in that 48-hour window where he could get claimed. And I'd be actually shocked if he wasn't, but it's a possibility he can stay in the system, which is fine. But I guess the point I was going to make, whether he's in their system or gets claimed by someone else, if he does get claimed, the Brewers have, I think, up to 7 days to trade him or something before he has to be given to the claiming team. But I think he holds really little trade value at this point, just because this is just like another example of how the lost year of the pandemic for minor league players was really something that's detrimental to some of their development. And I think Feliciano is an example of that, especially like a young catcher really needs those reps behind the plate and with the bat and everything. Like, to lose an entire year, really, it's just sad, because I think he'll get passed by these guys that were playing that year, possibly in high school still or whatever, and didn't lose a year of their development. And so it's unfortunate, but yeah, he really has not hit very well in the last 2 years. And I think, fortunately, he will have to probably get his autograph if you don't have it already, Vince, because I think he played 3 games or something like that as a Milwaukee Brewer.
He did.
He
did, and I got it. Got it.
All right, so it's all taken care of then. But with that being said, it hopefully can stay in the Brewer system, because you can never have enough catching in the minor leagues. So. But if he does move on to another organization, we wish him the best as obviously a former Milwaukee Brewer. But really excited about having Owen Miller, just because he, hometown kid, kind of a fan favorite at other organizations. He's like a grinder. His versatility is awesome. I mean, he can play second base, first base. He hits lefties really well as a right-handed hitter. He played some minor leagues as shortstop and third base, and I think he even played. I read he started a game for the Guardians in a pinch at shortstop last year. So really, you can play all over the infield and possibly even a corner outfielder. And to have someone like that on your bench, I mean, he's really just like replacing our Jace Peterson role, really. And just like Jace, if injuries happen and with depth, he could, get a lot of everyday at bats this season and moving forward, which I think he could really do well with. Yeah. So he really has a good idea what he's doing at the plate. Has awesome contact rates. So I mean, I really, really love this guy. So.
Yeah, no, I do too. I'm excited about him. Our bench is kind of interesting. It's a situation where we have a number of bodies now, which is good, between Owen Miller and Mike Brousseau, and I would assume Caratini is our backup catcher, and we still don't know what role. And you and I have talked about this, but I think Luis Urias is probably best suited to be a platoon bench guy. But that's a discussion that the team, I think, is going to have. And then, of course, we just picked up Abraham Toro in the trade with Seattle for Colton Wong. So we do have a number of guys kind of in that bench mix. The one thing with all the guys that I just mentioned is that they have options remaining. So, it's good to have that organizational depth. We've had guys like you mentioned, Jace Peterson, guys like not on the same talent level, but guys like Pablo Reyes, who have filled in the last couple of years in that utility infielder role. So I'm excited, because I think that we've overall upgraded our bench. I think that losing Jace is going to hurt a little bit, but we have been able to make up for that with some of the guys that we brought in. So I think that we're slightly ahead of where we were last year on the bench at this point. The bench is lacking a little bit of power. I think a lot of that's going to depend on what happens with Keston here before opening day. But
and he's an interesting
some decisions to be made.
And a couple of points here. You mentioned Taro, who I'm kind of excited about. Also at that age where he could break out with regular at bats. But I think with this addition of Miller, I think Miller is going to get the 25-man bench spot. And I think even though Taro's on our 40-man, he'll get probably squeezed with his option to start with everyday at bats at a AAA level. Obviously, if a hot spring could change this, but that's my thoughts on this. That Taro would probably get everyday at bats at third baseman unless and be there for depth at third and short. Not at short, at third and second base, and those are still some question mark positions for us. Obviously, Louis Urias will factor in at one of those two spots in some fashion. I'm not sure if Bryce Terang will start the year on the 20-man roster, manning maybe second base. The real question here, though, really comes back to is what is Keston Hiura's role on our team, on our 25-man roster starting this year? And what is his possible role in the future? I think it's really make or break time for Keston now, and he might not even have the opportunity to do that. What's your overall thought on Keston Hiura, what his role will be going forward in this organization, or whether or not it's time for him to move to another organization?
Well, I was talking about this earlier today with someone else. I think Keston has one of three paths at this point. Number one is, and I think it's the most likely, is that he's the Brewers designated hitter. I think that we've seen that he's obviously not a good defensive second baseman. And I think that we saw in 2020 that being a first baseman messed with his head a little bit. I don't know that he would admit that, but he didn't seem to function well when he had to play the field, or at least when he had to learn a new position and play the field at the same time. So I think that he's always had these raw instincts as a pure hitter. I still like him. I think that he could be a DH if he's given less to do defensively, and perhaps it should be made known right away that he's on, a couple months leash. I don't know that I certainly don't think that we want to continue doing the yo-yo thing where he's up and then he's down, and I just don't see that as being a good fit for him. The second possibility, I think, is that he is your right-handed power threat off the bench. He's got gap power. He's got actual power, particularly when we play the Pirates. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have a guy who can come off the bench and hit home runs, at any given moment, be a very viable late-inning option. So maybe that's his best role. And then, of course, the third possibility is that we try to, come up with any sort of trade that we could, but at this point, I don't know what kind of value that Hiura has in a trade. Sure that somebody would take a flyer on him, but the return that we might get is going to be far less than it would have been a couple of years ago. So I just don't know if the value is there I still think he's got more value to us than a trade. So let's just put it that way. So that's my take on Hiura.
Yeah, I agree with that take as far as he just doesn't fit. I mean, obviously we value versatility, and by having so many other guys versatile, I think we can get away with having Keston Hiura not that versatile, meaning not only can he not play many positions, he may not even be able to play one position. I mean, so it's hard to have a guy on your bench that can't play any fielding positions. I mean, technically you can play first and second, but Owen Miller can do those things now too. So to have Keston be the person on your bench, where there's really nowhere he can platoon or even come in defensively, it's not ideal. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough to keep him on the 25-man roster unless he's playing every day and raking, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that, Craig. I think so. My take on that is that you can have one guy on your bench that doesn't have a ton of positional versatility. One guy who's sort of just there. I'm trying to think of somebody good from like Brewers history. Somebody like a John Vanderwall. The guy could just come in and hit and sit back down.
Or Charlie Hayes, maybe.
Yeah, maybe like Charlie Hayes. Charlie got more starts than I would have wanted in the 2000 season, but yeah. I think that Keston could still fill a role. I'm not down on Keston. I think it's easy to be down on Keston because our hopes were so high for him going into his career, just, being a first round draft pick for the Brewers and putting up the numbers that he did throughout the Brewers minor league system and just all the hype that comes with that. But I think that Keston still has value. I think that, one thing that kind of doesn't get talked about quite as much as it probably should is the impact that his mom's battle with cancer had on him a couple seasons in 2021. So that's going to take its toll on anybody, let alone a young kid. These guys are young guys. I think that the talent level is there. I think that we saw him make some improvements in 2022. He's never complained. He has done what he's been asked to do. So I'm a little bit more bullish on Keston than some others. And I think that whether it's as a DH or as that power threat off the bench, I personally would tend to keep him, particularly when his trade value is going to be, I think, a little bit lower around the league than his value would be to us.
And that's why I think.
One final thought on that too is that, especially after the Renfroe trade, we traded a guy who had a decent amount of power. The fact is we don't have a lot of guys with power on this team right now. So I think that that's another element to Keston's game that does exist. That when he does make contact, he has gap power. So I think that's something to keep in mind too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, such a highly touted prospect, like a top 10 overall pick in the draft, back in 2017, where he's picked 9th overall. But I mean, it's really, he's also going to be, he just turned 26, just like Owen Miller. And, he's entering his baseball prime and he needs everyday at bats. And I almost want to think like a team like the Pirates or even Marlins or something would be chomping at the bit to acquire him at the trade and throw him in the lineup and just see what his bat does. Because if he really breaks out, I think he still has that like near superstar ceiling. And so if he's going to do that, you'd hate as a Brewer fan to see him do it with another team. So that's why I think they've got to give him one last chance. And his window to have the opportunity is closing very rapidly, especially on a team that wants to be a contender. I think, like you said, give him every day at bats somehow at DH or whatnot. For the first 3 months of the season, if he takes off, then he's solidified that position. And then, you'll have to leave Jesse Winker, who I think they expect to play some DH too, more outfield, or even consider trading him then and flipping him. So, and if he doesn't break out, then I think you just have to, for his own sake and even for the organization, I think you just got to move on from him. And I think, unfortunately, trade him low then, and just for Keston's own good as a human being and a baseball player, that he maybe does catch on and take off in another organization, just because the opportunity here, it's not going to be there any longer. So this happens a lot around baseball. Like when you finally get to the end of the time where you've had opportunities and you didn't run with them, given circumstances, doesn't matter. Like at some point, an organization has to move on from you. And we're really nearing that stage with Keston. And I think the Brewer fans themselves are even feeling it. So I would love for him to have success here in the first couple months of the season and break out and show that he is a middle of the order hitter and an all-star in the future. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's been a long climbing hill for Keston, from the great promise that he showed, and I feel like he still is young enough to still enter into that. One last thing, I guess, Matt Arnold, who's now is fully at the reins of the Milwaukee Brewers and controlling our roster moves and whatnot. Him and Stearns both were disciples that came through the Tampa Bay Rays organization, and if you really think about the Milwaukee Brewers and how they're being built in the last couple of years, it almost feels like we're the Rays 2.0, because the Rays have also a very, very small payroll in a small market, and their front office has done a pretty amazing job at keeping them as like perennial contenders and making playoff appearances year after year, in spite of a lot of roster turnover. So the reason that how they've been able to do that is with a couple of things, keying in on roster versatility and finding platoons that make both sides of platoon adding up to almost an all-star level player. And the Rays have been able to do that time and time again. And to the point that we're even bringing in former Rays organization, like someone like a Mike Purcell, I mean, is really only there to hit left-handed pitch it, and that's it. So, I mean, I don't know if this formula works. I don't know if I'm hugely in love with it, but it seems like that's the philosophy that we're taking. And these last couple of acquisitions like Toro and like Miller speak to that same volume where they're going to be given an opportunity to, be at least a platoon player and get semi-regular at bats at the everyday level, and they can contribute. Then they can solidify themselves as an everyday player, or if nothing else, this philosophy, this Rays philosophy, I'll call it, really the most valuable part of it, the part that I do like, is it provides great depth for injury, because if any injured player goes down, there's someone there that can play their position almost at anywhere in the diamond. And I really like that, that the versatility that brings in the depth, where you can turn to a guy while someone's recovering on the IL or whatnot. So I don't know. I'd prefer for us to target some really good everyday players to sign to like a 3-year contract and not have to worry about platooning. But I get for a couple of positions, it really works out. And then every once in a while, you have a guy like Rowdy Tellez, who probably got brought aboard as like, well, he'll play on the strong side of platoon at first base, and we'll see what happens. Well, he solidified himself as an everyday player finally with the breakout year last year. And so with this philosophy, those type of players, can emerge. And I think that Owen Miller or Taro, or even someone like Louis Urias or Castanheira, as all these guys are right in that, entering that baseball prime of 25 to 27. And that's part of this Rays philosophy too. Target guys that are starting to, not get every day at bats at other organizations, bring them aboard. And if they hit their stride right when they enter their baseball prime, you could really have yourself a player on your hands. And so that part of it I do like. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think they'll have to wrap it up for today. So hopefully there's some more hot stove action for the Brewers in the next couple of weeks, so we can bring you some more podcasts. But not, hopefully everyone has a happy holidays.
Yeah, I was going to say too, and thanks for all of you who have sent in to Scott Loves Baseball at yahoo.com to try to convince our co-host Scott Bartell to re-embrace the Milwaukee Brewers and the sport of baseball as being the great national game that it is, and to return to our show to talk to his friends here about baseball. We're planning on delivering some of those messages to Scott here in the coming days to help to save Christmas and our show. So hopefully Scott does return. I know he was, slinking around the press conference today at Miller Park, but hopefully we get him back here shortly on the set.
Yeah, returning the love of baseball back to our co-host Scott Bartell will certainly save Christmas here on the Brew Crew Review set. So we appreciate it. So yeah, get those emails sent in here between now and Christmas, please. To Scott Loves Baseball at yahoo.com. Give them reasons why baseball is awesome. Whatever you want to send, poems, YouTube clips, links to old Brewer highlight videos, reasons why Keith Ginter is awesome, and all those type of things. And I think we'll have Scott back here in the fold within no time. So we appreciate all from our listeners.
Such a great man. And don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter. Brew Crew Review 1 is our Twitter handle. We definitely interact with fans on Twitter on a regular basis. So feel free to reach out, and we will read your questions on the air during our next episode. You can also email us at Brew Crew Review Podcast with an S at gmail.com.
All right. So this holiday season, remember, Brewer fans, to stay warm and to stay classy, and go Brewers.
Go Brewers. Do, 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 do.